Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 10th anniversary of the Nantucket Book Festival. Thank you for coming. This is our first comedy panel in 10 years.
And they chose to do it at 9 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, they chose to do it at 9 o'clock in the morning because the 8 a.m. slot was not available. Okay. So, have any of you, by the way, ever worked a Methodist church before?
Yeah, I grew up. I mean, that's what I used to be. I'm a lapsed Methodist myself.
So let me start by, I'd like to introduce the panel. Let me start by introducing Roy Blount, who, by the way, I knew you very well. I knew your name very well, but I didn't really know your work. And the Nantucket Book Festival is an opportunity for us to discover writers who might be famous, but we don't know them.
By the way, an author really likes it when you say, I didn't know your work.
I don't get paid for my name.
However, as a result of this, I really started doing a lot of research, and I found out that I relate to you because my wife and I moved from New York to the South, to Atlanta, right near Decatur, Georgia. My children went to school right near you.
All right. It's a good town, Decatur.
And so just to tip you off to one book for Roy Blount, the one that caught my eye was, if I could tell you, it was the one on the South. Long time leaving dispatches from up south, and on every single page there is a line that gives you delight, including, I am an emigre from a region that tried a century and a half ago to emigrate from the United States en masse. Every single page there's a line.
I'm really kind of touched that y'all didn't let us go.
We've regretted it.
No, yeah.
I want to go next to Susie Essman because when I think of how many hours my wife and family and I have spent getting the clicker, going to HBO, saying maybe a new season of Curb Your Enthusiasm has dropped, and then we're always surprised to say, no, it hasn't because we just finished the last season yesterday. But we do that specifically so we can see you and Larry David riff, and then we just rewatch the episodes and we laugh just as hard the second and the third and the fourth time. But I didn't know why you would be here because I didn't know you were an author. And so then I looked up your memoir and I started reading your memoir, What Susie Says.
Yeah.
And the subtitle is?
I don't remember.
Ah.
It was a long time ago.
And it's early, yeah.
The subtitle?
Bullshit wisdom about love, life, and comedy.
Yes, and that's where I learned that you, as a little girl, dreamed of being an actress, and then you refined your dream. You wanted to be a character actress, and then you became a stand-up comic, and it's all come together on Curb Your Enthusiasm, and
And season 12 coming up.
Good.
We haven't shot it yet, so, something bad could happen, but so far, poo.
I go next to Alan Zweibel, whose name, I really know, but we didn't know what you wrote on Saturday Night Live. On the first writing team of Saturday Night Live, and I read your memoir, and your memoir's title, I love, is Laugh Lines, My Life Helping Funny People Be Funnier. And I read your book, and I'm saying, oh my God, you're the one who wrote the John Belushi samurai scenes. There's nothing better than that, but more relevant to my life, I just want to tell you briefly, my father was a stand-up comic, my late father, and he worked the Catskills. And
What was his name?
His name was Bobby Shields. And
I know Bobby Shields, and I know what apartment he lived in the city.
You do?
Yeah. Bobby Shields, I knew when I was writing for those guys.
That was a different Bobby Shields. That was
Sorry, I got too enthusiastic.
No, but did you ever write any jokes for him?
Bobby Shields. He may have stolen jokes I wrote for other people.
I will tell you something. I believe I did hear growing up in the early 70s your name and people recommending this was your entree. I just learned from your book.
Oh, that's
into the
interesting.
business.
That's nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, and so I was wondering if I owed you $5 from my behalf of my father.
We'll talk on the way out. Okay.
But listen, thank you so much for your humor and for making funny people funnier. And Dave Barry, early 1980s, I graduated from Vassar College. I went to Washington, D.C. I had a job there. And whenever your column would come out in the Washington Post, I read it. And then I said, I want to refresh my memory on your columns. So I didn't realize that you had won a Pulitzer Prize in 1988 for distinguished comedy, and here was the line from the Pulitzer Committee: for his consistently effective use of humor as a device for presenting fresh insights into serious concerns, which is really why we're all here. So I'm just, as a final note, I realize you all are friends, and you two have actually collaborated on one of the funniest books. It's for the Jewish Passover of holiday, and you co-wrote it with a third friend of yours, and it's the Passover Haggadah. Very, very funny, and I just want to quote the blurb on the front, which is, and there were 3 of you authors, 3 of the funniest people I have ever created. Sign God. And so I'd like to introduce you to 4 of the funniest people ever created.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. We're about out of time. So. Anyway, thank you, Michael. And I just want to stress, I am not Jewish. Alan is Jewish. I'm not Jewish. But my wife, Michelle Kaufman, is Jewish. She's Cuban Jewish, or Jubin, as they call themselves. No, they do. They call themselves Jubins. There's a lot of them in Miami, which is where we live. And my joke is they didn't come on rafts. They parted the Caribbean. But anyway, we were talking about what we should talk about up here. And we decided that we would start quickly talking about how each of us got into humor, because we're all in humor business. Mine is a sort of a simple and short, kind of boring story. I worked for a newspaper, and when I got out of school, I wanted to write, and I ended up at a little newspaper in Pennsylvania called the Daily Local News in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and immediately realized I didn't really like so much writing news because it was, you had to have facts. And I was always I loved humor when I was a kid, but my idol was Robert Benchley, and I wanted to be like Robert Benchley. So I started writing newspaper columns whenever I could at the Daily Local News, and I kept on doing that through a variety of other jobs until finally enough newspapers started running them that I was able to do that for a living, and I never have worked since. So that's how I got into humor. It's kind of a boring way, Alan.
I got in a different way. For me, it was not even my idea to become a comedy writer. This was a decision that was made for me about 45 years ago by every law school in the United States. I graduated college, did well, but you had to take the law boards, LSATs. Lowest grade was 200, highest grade was 800. If you can write your name, you got a 200. If you were Albert Einstein, you got an 800. If you were Alan Zweibel, you got a 390, which was like vegetable mentality. So I went home, told my Long Island Jewish parents that I got a 390 in the law boards, and about a week later, this is after they uncovered the mirrors.
Wait, there's Jews here.
Oh, yeah, see? Yeah, I was nervous about that reference, yeah. I'm looking around, seeing a lot of pastels. I said, go for it, okay? My dad gave me $1,000, which I then gave to a man named Stanley Kaplan. For those of you not familiar, he's got these schools all over the country where they teach you how to take standardized tests. I gave him the $1,000 because I wanted to retake the law boards. And for 6 months I studied. I had number 2 pencils. I had earphones. Okay, I'm looking at old tests, honing my testing skills, retook the law boards, and my score catapulted up to a 401. So I figured at that rate, I'd be about 90 before I got into an English-speaking law school. So I started writing jokes for comics, and that's how I got into it.
I think it was the only thing I knew how to do. I didn't know how to do anything but do comedy. So friends kind of forced me to get on stage. I was old. Well, not as old as I am now, but I was 28, and I was lost and waitressing and floundering and doing, self-destructive things like we did back then. And friends forced me to get on stage. And then after about 2 months of doing stand-up, this is what I was born to do, and just kept on going. I actually did well on my LSATs.
A belated congratulations to you.
But I knew that I'd kill myself if I became a lawyer. So I didn't even apply, and then, my mother wasn't happy, but she never was, so.
So what else?
That leads right into my motivation. I was living up in New York, and my parents were still down in Decatur, Georgia, and my sister was down there too. And she was going to go to Europe with a guy she was not married to. And my mother not only was unhappy about it, she took pills. And they had this horrible, and I flew down there on the red eye. By God, I'm going to do something good for somebody. I'm going to defend my sister. If she wants to be a whore, let her do it. And I didn't put it that way. But I didn't say that. But we got this awful argument. I was just making things worse and worse. And at one point, my mother said, "You have ripped out my heart." This is literally what she said. "You have ripped out my heart and stomped it flat on the kitchen floor." And I realized that it was horrible. I mean, it may sound funny in church, but in the kitchen there. But I figured if I pushed it just a little bit, you have ripped out my heart and stomped it flat on the kitchen floor that I just finished mopping. If you go through my work, that's how everything that's every laugh is pretty much that.
That's so interesting to me. Because that's such a Jewish mother thing.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
And yet not.
My mother, actually, there was a Dan Greenberg or somebody wrote a book about Jewish mothers. And she was laughing and showing me this book, and I said, "Mom."
Recognize anyone?
So we were talking, well, actually, Susie had an idea for an actual topic that seems kind of relevant to the times, which is, and this is something everybody in the humor business talks about a lot, the change in the culture where things that we used to joke about we're no longer allowed to joke about. And this has had many ripples and repercussions in the business we're in, particularly if you talk to stand-up comics now. A lot of them don't want to work on, for example, college campuses anymore, which used to be a very lucrative thing for especially mid-level comedians to do. A lot of them won't do it anymore just because they have to go before some committee that says, well, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about this. And as you all know, if you've ever been to a comedy club, it's not generally a sensitive environment. And so anyway, as it happens, Susie's working for a show that violates pretty much all of the rules of wokeism every week, and yet is very successful, still on the air. You want to talk a little bit?
Well, I think that we're grandfathered in because we started in 2000, But I also think, I'm a stand-up comic. I don't do it really anymore, and thankfully I don't. Because I would do what I did anyway. If an audience doesn't like it, that's always been my attitude. You put it out there. If I think it's funny, okay. But I think that I feel for these young comedians, because I remember when I was coming up and there was no phones in a comedy club and nobody was recording you and nobody was tweeting about what you were doing. And you had the privilege of crossing the line and finding out where the line was. And the only way to find out where the line was to have that little feeling up your spine, which was like, uh-oh, I went too far this time, and pull it back. And that's how you develop as a performer. I don't know what they do now, not having these rules of what they can say and can't say. Practically, I was talking to a comedian friend of mine the other day. We were saying we couldn't do any of our act now. I mean, we would just be vilified for doing what we, because I did all these ethnic characters and, it just wouldn't be allowed. But on Curb, I think what Larry does is he presents himself as so politically incorrect, almost making fun of his own political incorrectness. Like he points a finger in the eye of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he even did it when he did stand-up. And that was what Larry did. And back then, this is in the mid-'70s, the prediction was that he would either be a monster star someday or
Homeless.
Homeless.
Yeah.
living in a big box on a street somewhere. I just wanted to say that these two Jewish men were on the deck of the Titanic as it was going down. One of them started weeping. The other one said, "Why are you crying? It's not your boat." Okay. Now that's a joke that we...
He stole from me. He stole that joke from me.
Well, you can read the North Review then. That was yours, I thought it was Adam's. And we as writers even, the first drafts that you do, you go wild, okay? You just push the envelope, you do whatever you think is funny, and then you let others tell you, no, you gotta pull this back a little bit, this is a little bit, this has to be tamer. But now we go in, or at least we have, our hands are sort of tied. There's another part of your brain that's going, they're never gonna like this, so maybe not do this now. And it tempers everything.
Well, let me ask a question of this panel, because you're all funny. Is humor by nature offensive? I mean, shouldn't it be offensive in a certain way?
Of course it is. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to push the envelope. It's supposed to be a reflection of who we are. And you go back to Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels, you even do the Marx Brothers, you can keep going forward. Monty Python, it's about punching up. Mm-hmm. It's the Queen, it's the church, it's the government, And now it's each other. It used to be we'd make fun of each other and then go out to lunch. We can't do that anymore.
I wrote humor columns for many, many years, and I never, ever wrote a column on anything, ever, that didn't get people who wanted to cancel their subscription, ever.
That means you're doing your job.
What? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you just get so used to it, we probably can't do this anymore because nobody subscribes to newspapers anymore, but my first job was at this newspaper, the Daily Local News, and people like to call in and threaten to cancel their subscription. That's the big call. They're angry at something that they saw in the paper. And I had an editor named Bob Shoemaker who would listen to somebody irate, yelling at him on the phone, and just before they got to that moment, Bob would say, "I'm sorry, sir, but we're going to have to cancel your subscription." And they would go, "No, you can't do that." But anyway, yes, always, people are always offended by humor, and that is one of the ways it's working, that some people are offended. I call them the humor impaired. They're out there. They just will not accept the idea that you could make fun of anything. There's always something that, so.
You look at the people who push the envelope, Richard Pryor's, Lenny Bruce's, they just kept on pushing the envelope, and they sang George Carlin, and we're all better for it, or at least we were.
Yeah, I've started writing a thing on Substack.com where you can just write anything you want to, and you got no editors, and you got no, and I don't have many subscribers, in fact, but one person wrote me this angry letter, comment, and I said. And I wrote back and said, "I'm sorry," and he called me names and things, said, "You just lousy motherfucker," and because they can say anything too.
That's right. That's right.
And I answered, and then he came back and said, "Gee, I didn't think you'd answer me." It's like, I heard from you. Oh well, I'm sorry. So I think they love the chance to just yell at somebody. I mean. Nobody yells like Susie.
I've actually been walking down the street with Susie, where a guy would approach us, and he recognizes Susie and says, "Okay, call me it." And she looks at him and goes, "You're a fat fuck." He requested it.
Now, for a fee.
I raise money for charities. By telling people they're whatever, bald fuck, but not you, of course, Dave, but.
Okay, we've broken the ice now, I think. And,
we got the F-bomb going, good, yeah. So we talked about this, that we'd like to do questions sooner rather than later, because and if you don't have them, we can keep going. Alan Zweibel can do 25 minutes on the review he got for his movie North.
Let's hear that.
Okay.
Let's hear that. You know, we're talking about political correctness, and we're vulnerable in the sense that we just put it out, and anybody can criticize us. Now, Alan, who is a consummate writer of films and television, and wrote
Pamphlets.
wrote a movie. Continue.
I wrote a movie that was based on a book that I wrote. I spent 2 years of my life writing it. What's that?
Put the microphone near your mouth.
I was talking.
Yeah, you're talking to your phone.
What's your number? I can call you directly and do this. Oh, I lost it somehow. Oh, wait a second.
I went on a book tour with this man, and I am not lying when I say that every morning at every airport we were in all over the United States, the first thing he did was buy a new charger for his iPhone. Every single...
All right, so I had written this book. It's about, our son Adam was at that age. He was about 7 or 8. And at dinner, he would look at me and Robin, my wife, across the dinner table. And from the look on his face, you just knew that he was thinking, I could do better than these two, okay? So I wrote a book about this 7-year-old boy who declared himself a free agent from his parents, went all over the world offering his services as a devoted son to the highest bidding set of parents, okay? Rob Reiner, who hosted the third Saturday Night Live ever, I sent him the galleys just for a blurb. I remember the blurb. It was really good. He said, if you read only one book this year, I wouldn't call you an avid reader, okay? And he said, you know, I'm a director. And he had done A Few Good Men and Spinal Tap and When Harry Met Sally. He said, I'd like to do this as a movie. Music to a writer's ear. You write something, you pay to adapt it, and you're going to film it. $50 million movie, okay? Moved to LA, moved my whole family there. Elijah Wood was in it, Bruce Willis, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Jason Alexander. And I flew my parents out from Boca. There were 2 less Jews in Florida that night for the big premiere. Biggest night of my life. Then the next morning came the reviews. And now here's the one from Roger Ebert, who was arguably the most preeminent critic back at the time. This is what he thought of my masterpiece. I hated this movie. Hated this movie. Hated it. Hated every simpering, stupid, vacant, audience-insulting moment of it. Hated its sensibility that thought anyone would like it. Hated the implied insult to the audience by its belief that anyone would actually be entertained by it. Now, you know, on the surface, this may seem like an unfavorable review, but if you read it again, we can pass it around. I think he sort of liked it. Okay.
So we just completed the tradition of, I've never performed ever anywhere with Alan. We didn't read that, including at other people's funerals. But so, does anybody have any questions about anything? Yeah, sir.
For each of you, do you think having a sense of humor is innate, or is it learned, or where does it come from? And number 2, what shows did you watch growing up that sort of influenced you to make you what you are today?
Who are you? Are you asking all of us, or?
If you don't mind.
I personally think that that you're born with a sense of humor. Yes, is a sense of humor.
Can you read the North Review again?
Yes.
Was just asked.
Is a sense of humor innate, or is it learned? And then what TV shows did we all grow up with that influence? I have a granddaughter. She's funny. She's 15 months old. She's funny. She's just, you see little kids, some kids are just naturally funny and some are not.
Some turn to you and say, you old fuck.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think it's something, I think it's a gene. I think it's something you're born with. I think it can be developed or not developed. But I think it's a worldview that you have as a child, a prism that you look at the world through humor. For me, it was a survival mechanism to be funny and to see the world in a humorous way.
Yeah, the saddest thing in the world is those people who go around and go to put on humor workshops at corporations. You know, I've worked in corporate. There's somebody in your office who's funny, and there's people in your office who aren't funny, and you're not going to change the one into the other. But anyway, so I totally agree with Susie that it's an. I would say my favorite, funniest show I ever saw as a child, and it was funny to me because my mother had a really, really vicious sense of humor. I got my sense of humor pretty much directly from my mom, who was a housewife, as they called them back then, but she was really funny, edgy, like when we would go down, and I grew up in Armonk, New York, which was a little village back then, and we'd go like around to run the errands. Mom would go to the cleaners. She would go to the butcher. She would, and they all knew her. The tradesmen all knew my mom because she was funny. We'd go into like Brissetti's Market, and Bob Brissetti would be slicing bologna. He'd go, "How you doing, Marion?" And she'd go, "Just shitty, Bob," which none of the other moms did. So anyway, I'm setting up, which was the favorite TV show, was Queen for a Day.
Oh, I loved Queen for a Day. Loved Queen for a Day.
With your host, Bob, what was his last?
I don't know, but I could picture.
Bob
Barker
Bailey.
was not Queen for a Day.
That was Price Right.
Right. No, you're right.
He had a
Jack Bailey.
mustache.
Jack Bailey.
He had a mustache, right? He had a mustache.
And anyway, it was like the show was basically 3 women would get up and just see who could
more
be the most pathetic,
Yeah.
and whoever was would get in a man-a-home freezer.
Yeah. Right.
Which in no way would solve her problems.
Especially when he gave it to a woman who had no electricity. Yeah.
But my mom's like imitation is, like, "Well, Jack, I have cancer, of course." It's just starting out with But anyway, so that was my favorite show.
For me, it was the Dick Van Dyke Show. I was like 12 or 13 when it came on the air. I saw this good-looking guy, Dick Van Dyke, married to a very pretty Mary Tyler Moore. They had a house in New Rochelle. They had a kid, so there was a family. He spent his days lying on a couch, joking around with Buddy and Sally. I went, I want to do that.
Yeah. Sally was a big influence for me also because
Really?
because she was. I didn't know that was a thing that a woman could do, be a comedy writer.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And although she never got the guy, and she was the pathetic one.
She was Maury Amsterdam's the other one?
Yeah.
The writing partner.
Right.
Yeah.
What was who played that?
Rosemary.
Rosemary. Thank you. Okay.
There's a fascinating documentary about Rosemary, by the way, who was a huge star when she was a kid. Huge. For
How
whatever
huge
that's
was
worth.
she? No, I can tell you.
Well, I was trying to think of something surprising, but I love Lucy. That's how old I am. I mean, and I don't remember anything after that.
Lucy always, when I was growing up, Lucy annoyed me because she always had to ask Ricky if she wanted to buy a hat. And I was always like, go buy your own fucking hat. What do you got to ask Ricky for? That used to, my little feminist self, that bothered me. That she would go, yeah, Ricky, and do the baby talk. Grow up and go get a job and buy your own hat. That bothered me.
Yeah, but she and Ethel always got Ricky, one way or another.
Yes, but
She just wanted to hear him say, Babaloo.
Well, we were answering a question, I think. Does anybody,
Yeah.
any more? Yes, sir.
Joan Rivers had this file system for all her jokes. Do you have any tricks or how do you archive your stuff?
Question is, Joan Rivers had a file system for all her jokes. Do we have a system? He has his phone.
Yeah.
scraps of paper all over the house.
Yeah, what we all do is we carry a little notebook with us. We write stuff down. We take it home. We categorize it. Milton Berle said he had 2 million jokes that he willed.
That he stole.
That he stole, and he willed to the Library of Congress. And there's, I don't have a file system, but I have reams of paper with ideas for plays, jokes, and whatever. So I think we all have our own way of doing that.
Milton Berle was strange, wasn't he? I mean, on the air, he was strange. And Jerry Lewis, with some of those the Colgate Comedy Hour with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. I can't do Jerry Lewis, but God, and Milton Berle was also I'm trying to think of a polite term for this, but he acted like an impaired child.
Well, you know the Milton Berle stuff, right?
Which stuff?
He was my wife is going, Alan, don't. Do you want to hear the Milton Berle stuff?
Alan, do. Alan, do.
Milton Berle was reputed,
Oh, I know that. Oh, sure.
yeah,
I know
to
that.
have the biggest member, okay? And the word was that, I think it was David Brenner, walked into the sauna at the Friars Club, saw Milton there naked, and David thought that Milton had brought his son with him.
This is why they don't have comedy panels.
Next question.
Yeah. Yes. This woman grew up with Milton Berle.
Well, you
Well, then maybe you
can
can
you
tell us.
confirm
Yeah,
or
you can
deny?
confirm.
Oh, she was punished by not getting to watch the Milton Berle show. Texaco, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Seems to me that comedians are not only observers, but super observers.
It seems to her the comedians are not only observers, but super observers.
You see yourself as observers. And even though you didn't get into law school, I think you have to be smart to be a comedian.
I agree with that.
She says that Alan is not as stupid as she thought. She says that's not what she said.
You know what? I've always thought that comedians, that we see, that what we do is we see more for some reason than other people, and then we take it and we filter it through this crazy prism and we spit it out and say, this is how I see it. And that's why people say, oh my God, that's true. I never thought of that.
Yeah,
and there's a surprise there.
I've always said this, the jokes that people laugh the most about are not that weird. They're always the ones that people go, that's exactly right. That's exactly right, but I never thought of it that way. But it's never based on something strange.
No,
to
I
people.
don't think that's right at all. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
Well, then I changed my mind.
Dave, can speak a little louder for the people in the balcony, okay, because they can't hear.
Yes, sir.
I'd love to hear you guys talk about music and humor and why you do both.
Talk about music and humor and why we do both. What makes you think we do music? No, we're not. If you're referring to the band that we will be performing tonight at the Chicken Box. And I will say that it has been a lifelong dream of all of ours to play at the Chicken Box.
Yeah.
And like among the bands that have never played at the Chicken Box are the Rolling Stones.
A nice way of putting why we use humor in our music is like Bach didn't have to use humor.
The Chicken Box is named after him, by the way. Yeah.
The chicken box.
The Chicken Bach, yeah.
You know, I do.
Yes, the Chicken Box. Yeah.
I do think that but in both there's a tremendous. They both rely on rhythm. You know, it's all about timing and rhythm and beat and everything. In humor is rhythm and timing. And same thing with music.
Why?
So
Roy's being the curmudgeon over there. He's just disagreeing with everything. But to answer, really try to answer your question, we really never thought of ourselves as musicians in this band. Some of us have played. Ridley Pearson, who's sitting here, is actually a very good musician. So some of the Scott Turo's right there is terrible, but he's. No, Scott just sings in the band. But the idea really wasn't that we would be musical. The idea was we would just raise money for a good cause and it would be fun. And really it was supposed to be just one night in 1992, and everybody liked it. Not the audience. But we had so much fun doing it. And I always say to me, it's because what we do is, well, Susie's collaborative. I mean, not when she did stand-up, but collaborative,
Yeah.
But Roy and Alan and I, most of the time, just we're alone in a room. That's what authors do. and you don't have anybody helping you, and you're supposed to do what you do. It's supposed to be really good when you're done with it. And the band, we get to do something that we're all together doing, and we're terrible at it, and it's okay. So we really enjoy that, you know. We enjoy sucking musically.
When Dave asked me if I want to be in the band, I said, listen, I can't sing, I can't play an instrument. And he said, already you're overqualified.
Talking about observing, we made a mistake of our first concert was videoed. And we observed how shitty we were. And we got a little bit better, I think. Of course, we haven't observed ourselves since. So,
Roy defined our genre, hard listening music. Yeah. Yes, sir.
As super observers, you've been here probably at least a day. So, do you have any thoughts about, a skit regarding Nantucket?
Well, I have one question. Like, if you ever needed to buy like anything besides a shirt, do you have to go to the mainland? No.
Or anything affordable.
No, but yeah.
what are all those rocks in the street?
Yeah, you people should do something about that. Yeah. I live in Miami, and we don't have great infrastructure, but we don't have that.
I don't know anywhere else that has rocks like that.
Yeah, they're like really serious. Like when you go, no, you wouldn't want to be a pregnant woman. I mean, I wouldn't in general,
yeah.
But. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Each of you, who do you think is the funniest person that you've come in contact with as a comedian or a writer?
Alan Zweibel?
Oh, that's so sweet.
You were next to me. I couldn't think of anybody.
I was next to you.
My biggest influence as a stand-up was Richard Pryor. To me, he was the ultimate stand-up because he had everything. He ripped his insides open. He was vulnerable. He was accessible. He did characters. He told jokes. He was just the ultimate stand-up comic. And many stand-up comics believe that about Pryor, that he was the influence.
He used all that, a lot of stuff that people had been afraid to use before.
Yeah.
He just used it.
Yeah.
And he was brilliant at it. But he could also impersonate a dog or something. I mean, he could put himself or a deer. I mean, all these weird. He was just out there. But then I don't think you could do that anymore. I mean, even.
Well, that's a question.
Well, because he's dead.
Chris Rock. There are people who come along, like Shakespeare came along when the English language was just sort of taking shape, and Mark Twain came along when the American language was sort of, people were figuring out how to put it down on the page. And Richard Pryor came along just right at the right moment, and he was the man to do it.
I was very much influenced by older writers like Benchley. I know it's not politically correct to say right now, Woody Allen's body of work just blew me away. And the wits that were at the Algonquin Roundtable, I was very much admired George S. Kaufman, the great playwright, because it was all words. There was no...
He had a big one too, I understand.
Oh,
really? Yeah.
That's what they say. That's what they say.
That's what the S stood for, stupendous. George S. Kaufman was a great playwright. He wrote with Moss Hart, and he was... there was a play that the Bloomingdale family was producing down in Pittsburgh. It was struggling. They wanted to bring it to Broadway. So they called for George S. Kaufman to go to Pittsburgh, look at the play, and maybe try to help it. He watched it, and they got together with the Bloomingdales afterwards, and they said, what do you think? And he says, well, I think you should close the play and keep the store open late on Thursdays, okay? And I just love these guys that just played with words like that, you know.
both y'all mentioned Benchley. Robert Benchley was also a big influence of mine. An English teacher gave me Benchley to read, and he wrote maybe it doesn't sound like so much today, but he wrote an essay called My Face. He wrote about his own face. You know, and I was a teenager and self-conscious, and I thought, God, that's great. If you can write about your own face and it's funny, and you're clearly you're not impressed with you know, you really have a problem with your own face, but you can make it. But this is a Benchley Island, right? There's several generations of Benchleys here, including one who's a photographer now.
Yeah.
Looks like in the program. Bob Benchley or Rob Benchley?
Yes, Lee.
Yes.
Trying to ask for a limerick about Nantucket.
Roy is our limit. I meant to mention Roy's Substack, which I subscribe to, and you should subscribe to. It's really wonderful. Always ends with a limerick.
That's right.
And I asked Roy, when I knew the band was going to play up here, if he could come up with any limerick starting with "There once was a man from Nantucket" that didn't end in "fuck it." But I don't know if he succeeded.
I thought it would slow things down, but here, you know, there's no way to slow this down, so I can. I have one I remember goes like, it's a Creole woman's lament, and it goes like this. I hope I remember it. Our marriage again is postponed. He says he will, then he won't. Prime and time and I'm all rhyme, but libido and Thibodeau don't.
What does that have to do with Nantucket?
Nothing. It's I forgot. That's the Louisiana limerick.
Got the Thibodeau. We got time for one more question, I think. Yes, sir.
Do you remember, like, what was the time that you bombed the worst?
My worst
The time
show,
that we bombed the worst.
Yeah, my worst show was, it was a group of Hasidim. And there was everything about me was offensive to them. My existence was offensive to them. And I got tricks. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I got tricks. Nothing worked. I couldn't, nothing.
Yeah. Especially if Hasidim, well, they wouldn't have been drunk, would they?
No.
No, so that's good. I have addressed drunken audiences, and some of them are great, but some of them just want to come up and tear your face off, and I prefer the first.
One of the first jokes I ever sold, I got $18 for this. I got high for a joke I wrote about a porn movie where the entire cast was Hasidic Jews, which was really unusual, especially the orgy scene, because the men were on one side of the room and the women were on the other.
Who'd you sell that to?
Freddie Roman.
Okay.
Well, I think that's it for our time. You guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out so
Thank
early.
you. How much fun was this?